Jana Malone. I am a faculty member here in the Department of Entertainment Industry. Welcome to the main room. And we are partnering with the Muscle Shoals Music Association, and I'm on that board of directors as well, to present a couple of panels for you guys today. And just to tell you a little bit about MSMA, which is the Muscle Shoals Music Association, our mission is to preserve and promote the legacy and the future of Muscle Shoals music. You guys are the future of Muscle Shoals music. So hopefully you'll glean something that will help you in your endeavor. I know these are tech-related panels today, but what we envision is trying to do this at least once each semester. So in the spring semester, we hope to bring you something business-related. But we're really excited. Suzanne Bolton, who is a board member, and I went to Nashville early summer, I think, and met with a group of, I don't know, I think there may have been 15 of you guys there. There's usually about 30 of you that meet once a month or something like that. So we just presented the idea of them coming to Muscle Shoals. Some of them have never been to Muscle Shoals, heard of Muscle Shoals, and graciously said, we'd love to come down and volunteer our time. So they're here and they're going to talk to you guys today. But also, MSMA has a website, a Facebook page. The website's under construction and we're kind of updating that. But we're going to have an online auction coming up very, very soon, and we've got some really cool prizes or some things that you can bid on, so be on the lookout for that. I want to thank our sponsors, because without our sponsors, makes it a lot easier. ASCAP is a major sponsor. Ralph Murphy is here in the audience. Thank you, Ralph, for that. Randy Bruce from the Florence Academy of Fine Arts, Department of Film and Television. He and his students are filming today. And Larry Bowser from the Marriott, Pam Minitry, Renaissance Realty, Susan Beckett from First Federal Mortgage, and Rick Elliott from Rita Tony's. I know you guys have your program, and the first page on the program, or actually the first bio, is a bio from Wolf Stevenson, and he was unable to be here today, but he sent a brief letter with apologies and asked that we read that. It says, please express to all seminar attendees my deepest regrets to having to cancel at the last minute. I was very much looking forward to a trip to the Shoals once again for a visit with all the music people there. My involvement in the music community there, working for over 20 years in the Muscle Shoals Sound Studios down on the river, holds many of the fondest memories from my 50-plus years career in this business of music. Nothing I've ever done can compare to the great times, great music, great friends that I experienced in the Shoals. I really miss it more than I can say. Give my best regards to all attendees and tell them to remember Wolf's first rule of studio recording: never, never, ever settle for, can't we fix that in the computer? Which is, of course, a mutation of the analog, can't we fix that in the mix? Wolf Stevenson. I'm just going to introduce the panel, the moderator, and then he will introduce the panelists. Most of you know Dr. Bridges. He is a faculty member here in the Department of Entertainment Industry. He's a professional musician, extensive background in audio production, media, and electronic music. He's a graduate of the Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences, has earned a BA and MA in commercial music and a PhD music education from Florida State. He's also an avid certified expert instructor. He's worked with producers T-Bone Burnett, Rodney Jerkins, Ted Riley, as well as others, and artists such as P. Diddy, Jennifer Lopez, Hilary Duff, Julio Iglesias, Bette Midler, and others. Chandler is also co-owner and developer of Gauge Microphones. Thanks for moderating, and I'll let you introduce them. Thanks, guys.
Today we have a really exciting program. These are rock stars of our technical world that we have with us. It's my pleasure to welcome. I'm going to give you a little bit of background, but you can check it out in our program. We have Andrew Mayer. Andrew Mayer is Technical Director of Paragon Studios, Franklin, Tennessee. We actually share a school. We both went to the Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences. This is a technical school. After Arizona, he ended up landing as an assistant engineer in Nashville and worked his way up at Paragon Studios. He went back to school, then came back and is now technical director. So I think you will all have a lot of good questions for him about how that's getting started in this industry work. Next we have Elijah Lidge Shaw. And he is a musician, record producer, engineer, and he owns Toybox Studio. So he built that studio in 2007, and that's in Nashville as well. So we have two studio owners. Over here on this end is Russ Long. And Russ Long also created a studio, The White House. And his background, born in Boulder, but he attended Belmont. And then last, but certainly not least, we have Mark Pollock. And he moved from California to Nashville in 1998 and has been a freelance engineer. I want to start off this panel today just by having you each go around and tell us just a little bit of background about what made you choose to be an engineer, or if you didn't really set out to be an engineer and somehow stumbled across it. Rich, would you start us off?
Sure, yeah. So the first thing for me was I actually went to school for architecture. I was in architecture school in St. Louis, and I had gotten my first guitar as a senior in high school, so I was playing and had some fun in college. And it didn't even really register with me that that was a real thing. You know, at that time, I just thought I was having fun. But at that time, I also got a 4-track, so a tape, cassette 4-track recorder was my first thing to record on. And I think the thing that qualified me as an engineer at that time was I was the guy who could figure out if a friend's band asked me to come record them, I could figure out how to connect all the Radio Shack adapters together so that you get that thing through this cable and this thing into that hole in the 4-track. And then that evolved later into, finally I played in a band years later and saw the inside of a real studio, and I realized, the light went off and I was like, these a lot of blinking lights and moving faders and big tape machines, and that looks way cooler to me than architecture. So I came back from my travels and then found out about Middle Tennessee State University, moved down to Nashville, knew nothing about it. I didn't even know Nashville was a music city. I was that clueless when I started. So I came down here and I got into it, and I wanted to do the recording. I think in my mind I've always been a musician and loved playing, but I sort of had an idea too that you needed to go to classical school or training or jazz if you wanted to be serious, and I hadn't done those things. And I always loved the technical side of stuff too, so it seemed like a perfect fit. I saw myself being another member of the band while making records.
That's great. So great. This job that we have as engineers always seems I should be paying for the pleasure to be working on these.
And often we are.
Yeah, exactly. Mark, same question. Will you fill us in a little bit about your background?
4-track was, before that actually was, played guitar, played piano, wanted to start recording demos, learn how to get it onto multi, and for 4-track, remember, buddy, 2 tape decks,
All right.
doing that ping pong thing back and forth until the tape finally broke, hissy and noisy. I love creative component of it, because you can steer
For some reason, it's not.
the entire band by how you mix, how you track it.
It is
It's a very
much-
creative position.
It is much
Yeah.
more than just technical.
Yeah.
It's, I think David Huber calls it a techno-creative art. Way he likes to talk. Right?
Well, I grew up playing drums. I started playing pretty young and thought I'd be a drummer at some point in my life, and had dreams of being on stage with The Who. And as I moved to Nashville, I was the best drummer in my middle school, best drummer in my high school, one of the best drummers in my college, and thought, well, I'm going to go to Nashville, and I moved to Nashville and was in a city filled with best drummers from the high school, and found myself placing somewhere between, 8,000 and 9,000 best drummer in town. So realized that I was far from the top drummer, and so a little discouraged about drumming after that. And then I also started playing on some projects for people. I got hired to play my first independent record, and that point came out as a cassette, but I remember going in the studio and playing really big and really powerful, and it was like, drums are going to explode, and couldn't wait to hear what the album sounded like, and you know, the artist called me, I got the cassette or whatever, and I put the thing in, and the drums sounded tiny and anemic, and I realized that, you know what, as the drummer, I had no control over what those drums sounded like. It was somebody else that did that, and all of a sudden started to become more interested in being the person that made drums sound big and powerful, or small and anemic, or anywhere in between, and also realized that the drummer was usually the guy that was in the studio for maybe 2 days for a whole record, where there's this engineer and a producer who sitting there for a week after week and really get to shape sonically how this record sounds. And so I just became very intrigued by the record-making process and having a heavy hand in shaping albums and everything. That's what got me in.
Andrew?
Yeah, for me, my first memories of anything kind of engineer related were my dad recording like us kids with his reel-to-reel. He didn't know what he was doing. I mean, he just was having fun, and I played guitar and stuff as a kid. And then I actually have sort of the same experience as you, Russ. Of course, I went to school for engineering. I went to the conservatory, and I found that because some guy knew I played guitar, a friend of mine. He was like, hey, you should go check out the school. I just happened to live near it. And it was like sort of a light bulb moment for me when I walked in for the tour of that school. Like, holy cow, I can do this as a job. I can get paid to be in the studio. But then I got to Nashville, and I always thought, oh yeah, I'm a pretty decent musician. And I started interning at Paragon, sitting in on sessions, and seeing these musicians come in who had never heard the song before, and they get it right in 2 takes. And you're like, how in the world? I'll practice a song I've been listening to for years, for weeks, and still make mistakes. So I was like, all right, I guess I'm done playing guitar. I'm not really done playing guitar, but I don't take it as seriously. It's more just for fun now at this point. But yeah, so getting into engineering really started as that moment of walking. Yeah, this is a real thing. It's funny how when you're young and you see things happen, but you don't think it's possible. And it's not because you don't think you can do it. It doesn't seem like something that you're weird.
Yeah, I think that light bulb moment, that you mentioned had similar experience for me. I just didn't know about the field. And I talked to a lot of my students about that. I thought you could either be a teacher, a performer, or a roadie. And I didn't have any nuance to the idea of roadie and the other people that work in the industry. But I think once you realize that there are these different options, different avenues, that you can really find a niche. And clearly all of you have been successful and found things that are satisfying and you enjoy doing. Just want to ask the audience, how many of you, by show of hands, want to be an engineer, specifically engineer? So we have a good number of people who are going to come up and continue this path.
How many musicians? Or more musicians?
And how about producers? How many of you specifically want to produce? Great.
Without ever pushing a button?
A few, right?
Could I make a comment? So, like hearing us talk about, being musicians and feeling like we weren't as good as we needed to be, but then watching, documentaries about Muscle Shoals and hearing the Swampers, you guys talking about, they're like, yeah, we didn't know anything about playing music when we started. We had to learn how to play the instrument, then learn how to read the charts, and then learn how to be really good in the studio. So maybe we should have just.
All right.
Something in the water.
Well, it's interesting too, like what sparks your interests. Well, thinking about how I became an engineer, a little bit of that is interesting because I had a friend give me a copy of Sonar when I was like in the Army because I played guitar, and like I recorded stuff with a cheap little like microphone that like has the round base, little arm that sticks out like a desktop computer microphone. I remember I'd like point it between my voice and the guitar and record myself that way. And that never interested me. Never once was I interested in that. But walking into a studio and seeing a concert patching gear, using, gear that had knobs on it, stuff. That inspires me. And like a recording program never.
Looking down.
But I think it's definitely like there's different kinds of how you, what's going to inspire you. Cool.
I know you are.
Next.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm very much a Pro Tools guy. But yeah.
I mean, how you view capture that creative,
Yeah, for sure.
how you hear it in your head, young, on.
And that, yeah, I mean, that's opening up all the technical aspects of our job, understanding that stuff so well that we don't even think about it. We're not like going, oh, well, here, we know. This is how I can make this more creative as opposed to just technical as well.
Good point. Technical signal has to be so ingrained and so you have to understand it so much detail to then be able to get past that and be creative. I know our tech students all learn Mike has to Mike. It takes time. It takes a lot of time to get that. And I'm wondering if maybe you could tell us, I don't know if you want to jump on this one, but when was the moment that you started to feel secure about your skills?
So Mike goes,
To the speaker?
Goes to your iPhone and then.
I do remember this. I remember one of the first studios I was in, finally like out of school and getting a chance to make my first record.
In Nashville?
Yeah, Nashville. Alex the Great is the studio. And so I was in there and I was in with the band, and I think the band were friends of mine, and they were still, drinking and smoking and having a good time. And I was trying to do it. I was like, oh yeah, of course, I'm going to join in. And so, they handed me something that was slightly on fire there. And then I took a look at the patch bay, and I just melted. It's like all these cables and all these buttons and knobs, and I was like, that was the last time I ever did that. And so I think that was, whether I felt confident, I realized what was going to make me not feel confident about it. I needed to just have a really, really clear head in the studio to do this stuff.
For me, I would say I had a little bit of a benefit of that. Right out of high school, I went into the military, and I was trained to be a mechanic, and specifically a fuel and electrical systems repair. So I rebuilt fuel pumps and starters and generators. So I had a pretty high electrical background. So signal flow, by the time I went to school for audio engineering, signal flow was something I already understood. So I definitely had a leg up in that sense. Never really, it was, all right, cool, what's my signal flow? Boom, done. I understood it right away. So that's something I know a lot of, being at the studio, we have a lot of interns through, and interns struggle with that. I think that's something that, like, if you're serious about engineering or recording yourself, you do need to understand how this stuff works so that way you can properly use it. There's so many problems you get from people bringing in their recordings that they recorded at home, or low budget projects where they're using cheap gear, and a lot of those problems stem from just not truly understanding how that gear is supposed to function, and it makes your product harder to work with. It makes it harder to make something professional that you want to put out. So it's a good starting point to build that. And you have to study a little bit about electricity. It's kind of as simple as that. If you understand that basic stuff.
the signal flow needs to be second nature as well. I mean, you
Yeah.
need to know it so well that it's automatic. It's one of the most critical things when it comes to troubleshooting. If something's not working, rather than try to have to think back, and think, or test the wrong thing to start out with, if you know what problems would cause a certain result, whether it's a noise or no signal at all, or feedback or whatever, understanding signal flow will help you get to that problem really quick, and it'll also help you be creative and know if you want to change what you have into something else. Understanding signal flow will let you know what the difference between putting a compressor before an EQ is or putting an EQ before a compressor is. So it's and it's not something you ever want to spend time thinking about. It could be second nature. App work part of your work as well.
Yeah, and you can't stress that point enough, especially if you want to be an engineer, because most likely you're going to start out as an assistant. And as an assistant engineer, that's all you do, signal flow.
Yeah.
And yeah, you take session notes and things like that, but you're there to make sure everything works, and if it doesn't work, you need to fix it in seconds, because every minute in the studio is a lot of, you have to think if you're, doing a band session, there's probably 5, 6, maybe a couple more players, plus you got everyone else in the room, everyone's getting paid 50 to whatever dollars an hour, and the studio time, and then the engineers, every minute's like $20 to $25. So you have a problem, and it takes you 5 minutes to fix it, you have $125 to the producer, you just wasted all because you didn't know how to follow your signal properly. So it's like, those things, those moments are important. That's how you're going to set yourself apart to get in with that producer. Like, this guy's awesome. If there's a problem, he fixes it in no time. I want him working on my next. And that's how you become an engineer. Or that's how the engineer who you did that for goes, oh man, I got this project, I don't have time to do it. Would you take care of this for me? Like, that's how you build trust. And
I'm always amazed if I'm doing a session with an intern, and I'm hustling and I'm moving quickly around the studio, and they're moving slower than me around the studio. I'm like, you might let that be a cue,
Yeah.
If you see me sprint to go do something, that might be a cue.
Yeah.
But another thing is, like the idea of signal flow. I mean, it sounds like such an abstract term. It basically means just hooking stuff. And it's like, there's a little bit of a disconnect too between hooking up a lot of physical things in the studio and the world that recording has also become, which is computers and software. And software is also like kind of, it's kind of Frankenstein what actually happens in the real world, so that it can be kind of confusing how things get hooked up. And when it comes to microphones and mic preamps and compressors and EQs and consoles and routing things and running cables, you just have to do it a lot over and over again. And what Russ said is like, you learn when things don't sound right by screwing them up and being incredibly, terribly embarrassed about it, and then never forgetting after that. Like, you have to experience doing a full vocal session with somebody and it sounds thin, and then you discover later that something was half patched in or it was a broken connection, and that's why you lost all the low end in your sound, so that you won't want it.
I think school is such a great place to learn, not messing up big session, client, get the opportunity to try things out. Would like if you would talk a little bit about what benefits you got from school instead of trying to go out there and out on your own.
College in California, and, they were basically turning out classical players. That kind of pushed me. Oh, sorry.
You just keep talking. I got you covered.
Hey, can you engineer that?
Knowledge.
You hustle?
This is me hustling.
This is what engineers.
Anyway, so college pushed me away from what the direction they were trying to force me. Started playing a lot more, started working with a lot of jingle work, writing jingles, producing those things in California. It just made me hustle. So it may not be the answer you want. That's the answer that worked for me.
College for me was definitely learning the technical side of things. I thought Middle Tennessee and maybe at that time, and the stuff that was being taught was great, because it really made me memorize all the pickup, the frequency responses of the microphones that they give us as a list. You had to take a blank chart for a console and fill out the entire signal flow and what everything did and how it went, even if you maybe didn't use it. you know, it really helped you understand how all this stuff is working. And then I did a minor in electrical engineering too. So I got to learn how to solder, I got to learn how to do some cable repair and begin to understand circuit design and stuff like that. But I didn't learn how to make a record until I got out of school. The other thing that was great about school, and I've always felt this way, is it's fantastic to take yourself out of isolation with learning how to record music and put yourself in an environment where all your peers, you're going to learn so much from your fellow students who are trying to figure this out along.
Yeah, school is, for me, it was all about the fundamentals, like the basics of audio recording. Because all the techniques and things like that they taught me in school, either I have found better ones now, or I've learned new ones from other engineers that I've worked with. I don't feel like those things stuck with me as much as learning, understanding sample rate, word block, time code, signal flow, things of that nature. And all of that stuff are the tools that I need to be creative. And now I'm learning creative stuff just from figuring it out and from hanging out with other engineers and seeing what they're doing. And that's what I think school is best for, as far as what the school will give you, is those fundamentals. Your students that you're going to school with will help you see some creative ideas you haven't thought of, things like that. And granted, you can keep some of the creative stuff that your teachers teach you, but I feel like that's less important. And too many students come out going, oh, well, I know how to do this cool parallel compression. I'm like, sweet, but how do you route that on the SSL? Well, that's cool, you know how to do it, but you don't know how to do it. So it's like they don't know how to achieve it, even though they know what they want to try to achieve. I think being able to achieve that first is, where hopefully school will get us. So that way, all the creative stuff we learn and pick up later on, now we can just add that to our basic knowledge. Because that's all going to expand as we get projects.
Also, SIMPI and time code and clock grids and stuff like that. Some of that can sound kind of old school because, maybe if you're all inside your computer, you don't really have to think about that as much because the apps do it for you automatically.
Yeah.
But as soon as you go into a pro studio, that stuff still 100%
Oh, yeah.
all the time.
Yeah, and yeah, a lot of that does depend on, what do you want to do? Because there's plenty of interns that come and work with us, and they would be perfectly happy working on their laptop at home, mixing at a home studio. And that's great. If that's all you ever want to do, and that's all you're going to do, then yeah, you don't have to do some of that stuff. But if you want to work on the road, and we do live go recordings, well, you're probably going to have a backup rig. You got to know how to have that in sync with your main rig. Or if you want to work in a facility, you got to know, how am I going to send time? We do a lot of post-production in my studio. How am I going to send time code down the line to the producer that's in LA so they can hear the actor do their ADR while the video on their side is in? So these are all things that, technologies that you have to know to switch together. If you're in a self-contained system, yeah, some of that stuff you don't have to deal with. But so yeah, it's a little bit figuring out what do you want to do. Most of us here would agree that you may want to do something, but you have to do lots of things to make it in this industry. Hardly any of us sit at home and mix all the time. That require different technology.
That keeps it fresh to me. I love the
Yeah.
fact that I don't do the same thing every day. And I also thought it was pretty promising when you were asking who wanted to be an engineer and who wanted to be a musician, who wanted to be a producer, that sometimes people raise their hands more than once. But I think the great thing today, because the more, when I was in school, a lot of people did really focus on one thing, but I don't case. I think the more diverse you are, or hireable you are, and it seems like in certain areas of the industry are slower, there's different other industries that are picking up. It's a lot easier to stay busy all the time, even in certain slower.
Another cool thing about that is tasteful. So you guys are, like, if you're really into certain kinds of music right now, you start doing this and you get a lot of experience and you try a lot of things, you're going to discover that you will begin to even like some of the music. Like you'll begin to appreciate it because you become there's like a craftsman, and there's a craft to what you do, and there's also an art. And sometimes you can work on art that maybe doesn't turn you on as much, but craft, trying to do it really well, really gets you excited.
Sometimes just seeing the art, acquire it.
Yeah, I work with stuff all the time that I would never. Exciting to try to make it as good as it can be. It's exciting to make the client happy. I mean, get an artist excited about the record, get a producer excited, get a label behind it. All that makes me feel great about it, even if it's not something I would listen to at home.
And a lot of that can come back to your technical skills and fundamentals, because you may be working on a style of music that requires a different sound. And you may not do that regularly, but you know, well, if I do this, get that. So that makes you versatile. Back to the technical knowledge.
All those sounds, how to colors, create records.
Sound for film, TV, to me, a whole different world. Audio world, music. Find that in music, we often find ourselves striving to be a freelancer, wanting to get out, get engineering gigs. And I think everybody that's going to go into this field wants to know from you guys specifically how we go about it.
Pick up the telephone, send an email, go physically somewhere and meet somebody. For me, I was interning at a studio, and it's a studio called Woodland Studios in Nashville, and they had a lot of stuff coming through there, a lot of country and some other things. And country music wasn't really my thing so much. But then these two producers came through and mixed a record, and the artist was Bill Sobule. Remember, that was like the original Icon.
Right.
He did it. And anyway, so they came through and they mixed her record, and I just remember hearing the sound come out of the open door, and I was like, that's cool, like that's the kind of music. I like that. I really like that. And then I just kind of met him in the hall a little bit, and then my internship ended, and then later I was, delivering pizzas and getting ready to car. And the record came out. I saw it in the record store, and I was like, oh yeah, that's the one that they were doing. And I listened to it, and I was like, oh, sounds awesome, And I flipped the record over, and they had put the name of the studio on the back, and I just went home and pulled out the yellow pages, found the name of the studio in there, called them, and asked for the name of the producer, which a lot of times wouldn't make any sense. The studio, got a million producers. But I just happened to be lucky, and on that particular day, he answered the phone, and then, struck up a conversation. Next thing I was over there meeting him and made myself indispensable. I kind of attached myself to the studio.
Well, that goes back to your point earlier too about hustle. Like, you need to make yourself, and a lot of your opportunities are going to start internship, or maybe it's mentorship, like with a producer, or whatever. You're probably going to be doing stuff at the beginning. Maybe you're track your butt track, something like that. If you put in a lot of effort, you don't necessarily have to be the best person, but you have to show that you're willing to put more work. That's always going to grab attention. There's plenty of engineers that come through our studio that don't get the best sounds, but everybody loves work, and that's why. No, I'm never going to name names. But yeah, I go into like how I got my first. When I moved to Nashville after school, me and two other guys moved together. We got a house. First thing we did, went and got a map of Nashville, hung it up on the wall. We looked up where all the studios were. We put pins every location, and then we just started driving around. We went and knocked on doors, and half the time they were like, "Get out." But other times people would chat with us, and that's how we ended up like meeting a lot of people, and like getting in with Paragon. That's essentially how I got there. I went and checked it out. Now, granted, I called my school and was like, "Hey, Paragon looks like a cool place. I met them. Can you get me in?" And that's kind of where it went from there. But yeah, a lot of that down to hustle. I was at Paragon. I mean, I can understand most people, but when I interned, because of my military position, I was actually while I was doing my internship, technically going to school. So I didn't have to work. So I was at the studio from 9 till like 11 o'clock at night every day. So I was there all the time. Like, even if I wasn't good, I was just there. They knew they could rely on me. I think I was good, and that's why I got hired. But like, they pretty much couldn't not hire me at that point. I knew the place better than like the owner did. So it's finding a way to like really keep yourself in it all the time, and in front of the person who's possibly going to hire you. Like, we have interns that come and work 2 days a week, and we have interns that work 5 days a week. Who do you think I'm going to remember? I'm going to remember the person that's there every day, that's by my side every day. So I think that makes a huge difference, and some of that has nothing to do with their skill. Now, granted, if they're terrible and they mess things up all the time, that's different, right? But we're assuming that you are decent at what you want to do. If you have studied and know your signal flow or know your craft, then your ability to be there and be in the way sometimes is what's going to get you that first gig.
Mark, what do you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, Nashville especially is all about relationships. When I first moved to Nashville, my next door neighbor, he worked as A&R for a Christian event, and his wife was a writer. So I started doing them, started playing with her, and that led to a couple of things. She got interest by Richard Marks. He flew us up there. We did recording up there at his place around Chicago. That also led me to another first gig was assisting on a Kenny Loggins record. It was like all these things kind of jumped around, and if this didn't happen, none of this really would have. So, yeah, I mean, work with whoever, work with your neighbor, work with someone down the street. You don't know who they are, or what they will lead to, or what they will, or who they know. It's word of mouth, really.
Well,
That's the
there's not
biggest
a-
part about it, for me.
There's not a clear-cut path. I think that it's a challenge. It's not like being a dentist or an attorney where you got step after step and you know exactly what to do. And there's really successful engineers who never went to school at all, and there's people who went to school and got graduate degrees and aren't successful at all. I mean, it can go either way, and I think education is great, but it's not going to get you a job. The danger you have going to school is I've had people come to me who are graduates who feel their perception is, I've paid my dues, I've just been in school for 4 years, now I'm ready to make hit records. And that's not the case at all. I don't care how much money you spend at school or how much time you spend at school, you've not yet begun your dues paying until you get out and start working. And it's the people that have the attitudes, like Lidge was, these attitudes of people who are working hard and are going to go the extra mile. And I've had interns before who, they've got a certain number of hours they have to work, and it's 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 4 days a week or whatever, and we're right in the middle of something, and they're like, 4 o'clock, I'll see you tomorrow, or whatever. It's like, really? You're not going to stay the extra 20 minutes to get this done, much less stay. This is the exciting thing, and the thing about studio internships are, they're crazy. You can work 20 hours in a studio and learn absolutely nothing, and then you can have 30 minutes where you learn more than you learned in an entire semester in school. It depends on who's in that day and what's going on, and the chance to be in a studio, you should be in there as much as you can. I don't care, I mean, what your official hours are. The more, I mean, if you got to work, you got to work, but the more chance you have of learning something or meeting somebody that could potentially hire you down the road, or somebody that can, you know, you potentially forward your career through, is the more time you spend there, the better chance you have.
So I was going to stop up my head too, like, you know, you're in school now and you're thinking about the internship down the road and you're wondering like, what, you talked about like the opportunity to be in the internship and not come away. Well, the opportunity is already right here. I mean, you could literally look at your schooling as like, you make it your mission to train yourself now to be helpful to the first intern opportunity you have in the future, or the first job, because it's a service industry. Remember that I was up in Chicago working with Steve Albini up there, and he struck me when he said that. He was like, we're in a service industry. We really are. And it's like, you're really just, your mission is to help people accomplish their goals. So whether the people are an artist or a label, or whether you're interning and you're working in the studio, just when you recognize that, it makes it easier to make decisions too. Because, okay, well, what can I do to figure out how to help make somebody else's job a whole lot easier? And you know, it's kind of always in that state. I mean, I think even if you're the artist, your mission is to help your band enjoy your music.
Andrew, you've talked a lot about all the number of interns that come through your studio, and I hope you are all taking notes. He has a lot of interns going through the studio. What really separates somebody that makes you think, oh, this is somebody I really want to hold on to? Aside from just the work ethic, is there anything specific, or even the opposite, something
Doing stuff or knowing stuff about being asked is a huge one. You know, like this one is really silly. I use this example with other interns, but I had one intern once that every morning he would come in, he would make a cup of coffee and walk it over to me every morning. I never asked for anyone to do that. I can make my own cup of coffee. It's not hard. I don't care, right? But when he didn't do that, he wasn't there that day, I'd be like, oh man, I gotta make a cup of coffee. And it's something stupid, right? But like it stuck with me. And it's not because I feel like I deserve it, it's just because it's something that was there and now it's missing. So he made an impact, and it was one of those things where he actually didn't learn as much as he had hoped he would have there. And I'll tell you, part of the problem with him was that he did too much of that stuff. Like he tried too much to cater to my needs, or like our other engineer that we had in the house. Like he tried too much to like do things for us that weren't, and he didn't take enough time to study. But because of that, though, we were like, oh, we're not going to hire you because you just don't know what we need to know. But we got him a job, and now he's doing like production sound on films and stuff. So, and the funny thing is, he actually got that job because they were like, hey, do you know someone that could help us out, like with doing sound for this thing that we're planning for? It was just like a random contact, and they liked it so much. They also did film productions. Hey, help on this. Started out as just a sound utility, running cables and doing stupid stuff. Now he's doing boom op. So and a lot of that does stem from just his willingness to like assist us. That's almost better than him learning everything in a way.
That's the thing about it, internship opportunities too, is that doesn't necessarily translate into a job in that studio.
Right.
But but it's an opportunity to meet all the people that come through and to expand the network. And it's like nothing makes me happier than when I'm able to, help connect one of my interns with some small little, gig, editing something, doing something, somebody needs help with their, Pro Tools or whatever, and just make that first connection, because that's where it all starts. And then something else that I guess both of you guys said was something you're doing now turns into a gig later. there's a lot of planting seeds. So I remember noticing that, 5 years in, 10 years in, I start seeing it, and you're like, oh, now I can like see the thread that led up to this totally fantastic and like really meaningful, important record that I did. It all began with that, that one time somebody asked me to come, come solder a cable for them or whatever it was. So, and there's times where you meet people, you need to treat every meeting like as like incredibly important, because you never know that effort that you put in to meet somebody or to do, an hour's worth of work, that took you 5 hours to plan for and talk to them on the phone about, could turn into a totally fantastic record down the road.
It's crazy how roles change too. I've had multiple interns later hire me to mix projects they were producing. I mean, they were an intern for me at some point, and then they later produced, and then I worked with them, which to me, I take that as a really high compliment. They, not only do they think I do a good job, but they also, appreciate my work ethic and like enough, things in it on terms that they feel like, man, that's the guy I'd like to hire if I ever am in the position to hire.
That's why we're all here now, is because you're all our future bosses. So we want to make sure that we do something really nice for you.
I mean, it's funny, actually, that's how Russ and I met. I was an intern at Paragon, and we hired Russ to do front of house for a live music show that we were recording. And so I met him as an intern, and then we did a second that show, and I was an assistant. And we've kind of stayed connected pretty much ever since. So yeah, you never know who you're going to work with, how that. I mean, it's interesting too. Like even my time at Paragon, I worked as an assistant and an intern for 3 years, and I left. And I was like, I want to go back to school. I went for IT, so that's kind of how I'm the tech now. But it wasn't like I went to school and then immediately back to Paragon. I went to school. I did like LAV. I did all kinds of IT jobs, and then Fred, the owner, called me up one day, like, hey, so I'm looking for somebody, and here's if you're interested. I wasn't even living in the state, but I had made an impact on him that he knew that he could trust me. He's not even, when I first started at Paragon, the owner was there, worked in his facility, and he had a room, worked. Well, in that time that I left, he left to LA. He worked at a Warner Brothers. And so now he hired me to come back while he's not even there. But I feel like that's like something where you build trust with people. This is a guy we hadn't worked together in 2.5 years. Well, he's like, hey, back on this facility, much by yourself, while I'm not there. So I think that, that's keeping in contact with those connections as well. We still talk. Went out to LA a few times, and met up with lunch. So it's like all these contacts, not just meet people, you need to invest in those people. That will help keep that memory.
Really not that large, in my opinion. I'd like to have you talk to us about that fact, how small and close-knit it is. We see it as music business, huge concept. But you guys met each other on gigs. There are only a handful of jobs. There's only one assistant engineer per room time usually.
Yeah, many other aspects of the project. Sometimes it's like I get hired a lot of times if I'm not even on the project, engineer or do file management. So a lot of records for budget constraints get done in overdubs. So you send a mix out to somebody, fiddle, or and I got to pull it all back, get it all cleaned up, get it all lined up because they might have done something to get it on and get it prepped for. I mean, that's an aspect.
Good
Yeah.
to know. I need that.
See? Connection. So I think one thing that we haven't really talked about, especially in the music project, the music side of engineering, I think people need to think musically. you know? So if you don't play an instrument, learn to play piano, learn something, just so you understand what's happening. So you can quickly write a chart, know where you are in the song, and know when something is wrong, when it's off, things like that. You need to have a musical basis to make judgment calls. And it's going to be important on any level. I mean, when I'm tracking something, I'm constantly marking sections when that's the take. So I know where things are, so people can know when, hey, can you go to the first verse? Can you go to this? Whatever. Can we go to the turnaround? Can we change this? Can we double? Whatever. You know where you are. If you don't have that context, you really, it's kind of clueless.
Or to listen, the last bar of the bridge is a 5/4 bar, to know
Yeah.
to mark that as a 5/4 and then go back to 4/4 so all your
Yeah.
bars line up.
So if it's all 4/4 in meter, and you have this like 2/4 bar or a 5/4 bar, like you said, you got to know where those things are. Yeah.
You don't have to be a great player. The base knowledge, theory, or
Yeah.
form and structure
Sure.
is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how critical?
I think it's pretty high.
Understanding
Nine.
charts, probably one of the best tools for making session flow really well. And it took me a while to learn them, but now I do them, and I do them every time, particularly if I'm producing, I'll write the chart. But if somebody's got a chart, they should hand it to me, and that doesn't always happen too. So as an engineer, you want to communicate with the people you're working with in advance to remind them to bring you a chart if they've got it. Lyric sheet if they've got it. How many times people come in to do vocals and, oh, I don't know, we don't have a lyric sheet, or we might have it, or, you know, and if they just gave you one. So what it does is those kind of things give everybody who's working together a common language to use, which makes it really easy to communicate. And if you communicate well, the job gets.
And when I don't do a whole lot of string work, but I've done a fair amount, and to have this string score and to know if they're talking
And
about
that's all about
those,
measures.
those bars are
Yeah.
all numbered, but then to also be able to look and know that, okay, there's the violins playing a G, so when the conductor talks about punching in on the G, if he doesn't have the bar number or whatever, I know I can read notes and I
Right.
know what they are. And
The
I
chart
can
bar
plug-
number has to coincide with your bar number on the
Right.
session, so that you're not 8 bars off, 3 bars off,
And
whatever.
I
it is,
complained
you know.
about piano lessons a lot growing up, but I'm glad I
Yeah.
can read music.
It helps.
Play it, but
Our students have the opportunity class
Do it.
guitar, get some of
It's-
those.
yeah, I
Just to
think
get
that's
a
all
basic understanding of
great.
an instrument, piano is the easiest thing. It's all right there. It's right
Another
in front of
common.
you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say another common thing that happens is if you're engineering and the band's performing or somebody's singing and playing and you're in there, you just hit record and then you sit back and you're thinking about how it sounds and you're like, oh my, terrible, I have to do something, even though it's probably the final sound. But one thing to train yourself to do quickly is drop markers. So while it's happening, you drop in verse. Because what happens is you get to the end and then they're like, oh, can you punch us in the breakdown on the bridge right where it goes to the C, D, and you're like, again, I don't know where the C, D is. But then, somebody's like, oh, hold on, and then you listen, you hear them, the engineer pressing play in 5 or 6 different locations in the song trying to hunt for the section when it could have been just, you drop the marker and you know right where.
Well, that comes back a little bit to the point I made about how every minute, costs like $25 or whatever, and you don't know how to read music, and you don't know how to count bars, and dealing with repeats and stuff. Like we do a lot of score stuff at Paragon, and so we have plenty of times where composers will come in with their charts and they have repeats all over it. Well, with those repeats, that doesn't add up in Pro Tools. So if they're like, hey, we need bar 35 the 4th time, what does that mean? That's like bar 80, in Pro Tools. So that's one of the big things as an assistant is going through and counting those charts. And literally I'm writing every number out. So when a composer brings in charts with a bunch of repeats, I'm like, oh man. Now like I don't write anything anymore. I type everything. So when I have to do that, my hand hurts, I wear down 5 pencils. But like you got to be fast at that stuff because I'm literally doing that as the engineer is counting on the, following the chart on the sheet. So I have to be able to finish that before they finish recording the first pass. So that way if they're like, well, let's punch in here, now they know where to go. So
These are super important tips that they're giving here, that
all speed.
the bars and beats in Pro Tools need to match chart. That's important.
It's linear.
Or Logic
So
or
it's not
Cubase.
gonna-
Or whatever,
Yeah.
yeah, whatever DAW. That is very important. Starting from an even bar. Musicians don't like it when you start playing from a non-even bar. It's hard for them to catch the groove. Dropping markers, you go.
Yeah.
These are great tips.
Since we're pretty much all computer-based recording now, people that aren't, Nashville's pretty much a Pro Tools city. So if you're not working in Pro Tools, if you work with anyone else, you're going. And so you need to figure out how to get, if you're in Logic or whatever, how to get your files, translate over here so you can get overdubs and get them back, and just know where you are at all times. And, I know it gets a little techie, but,
It's not that
If
hard
you-
to get it right, but it's very easy to get it wrong.
oh, it's very easy to
Yeah.
That's
you
right.
know, little BS moves here and there, that checkbox or whatever that adds an extra bar here when you export it or whatever, everything gets off and syncing is frustrating.
Two comments. Andrew, you're describing, a very pro facility and like some high production sessions going on with strings and charts and everything. I work with a lot of independent musicians in more of a home studio environment too. But all these things still completely apply. So, for example, for an independent artist to come in and spend, a couple of days in the studio with you, and they've lined up these musicians, and there's all these people who've done the schedules, that is a lot of money that independent artist is having to sort out, thousands of dollars that they're putting out of pocket to come do this thing with you. So don't treat that as like more relaxed. Treat it, when you're running the session, act like you're the one who wants to set the bar for everybody else. So that it's okay for the artist if they want to be relaxed about the session, and if they've got a vibe with the musicians. But
Don't make them wait for you.
Yeah, don't make them wait for you.
Yeah.
Be the one who's always on top of your game so that they sort of get inspired by you to be more efficient. Because then they leave at the end of a session, tracking for a day or two, and they go home and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe we just did 12 songs in a day or 2 days or whatever it is. And that makes them feel great. And then another thing, you don't always have like charts with numbers in an independent session, but you do have very simple tools like, the bars beats counter. Hold that up on the screen for the very first time that the band comes in and listens to playback, and blow it up large so that they can see the numbers. And before you even hit spacebar and play and turn the speakers up for them, make sure you handed each musician and the artist a pad of paper with a sharpened pencil and say like, hey, if you hear anything, just jot down that number. Because otherwise everybody goes through and then like, yeah, there was this thing and I don't know, it was kind of sounded funky there and I don't know, is that a good enough take? And then, people get into this discussion game, and then you've got to go like peck around the session looking for where that error might have been when you could have just all your numbers and get it right the first time. And then last tip, for yourself, like I try to keep a pad there, and while I'm listening, as soon as I hear something, look up, grab the number, write it down, make a note to myself, forget it. Now when I get to the end, I can go back and remember what all those things are so important, like turning down, the snare drum preamp because you were getting overs before the next.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. It's like there's definitely different styles that happen within the industry itself. You've got, a lot of times we've got very organized sessions that hopefully everything's set up properly beforehand. There are companies that have paid lots of money. Like we do a lot of like choral print stuff, and these companies create packages that, they're recording demo practice tracks for churches, things like that. So it's all orchestrated ahead of time, literally and metaphorically.
And everybody's a pro, right? And it's
Everybody's
working.
They're
on
all
this professionally.
session players and all that stuff. But then there's times still where we've had a lot of tempo changes going on, and we don't have time to do a tempo map. So we're freewheeling it. So I have to count the charts to the minutes and seconds in the session. So now I'm writing minutes and seconds underneath the bar numbers. So can you count and count at the same time? Like it's the same, these are skills that you'll like want to pick up because they'll translate to different techniques and styles, for sure. Different situations. Big studio or
Sign
a
of
small
genius.
independent studio.
Two opposing thoughts
Yeah.
held at the same time.
It's like the only time I can do that. I can't have a phone conversation and do anything else, though. Yeah.
So we've only got a few more minutes. I thought maybe we'd switch gears and talk about some tech. So anybody want to give
haven't
us
done any of
their
that yet.
go-to electric guitar setup? How would you electric guitar cab? Marshall cab.
Marshall Cat, I'd probably put a 57, and I'd try and get a hold of a vintage Vet 47, put them side by side on the same cone. If you get that right, then when you're doing your power chords, if you get the low end rush, you got to compress it.
Not to be formulaic. I don't want to that's the wrong idea. Just as starting about acoustic.
KM84 is a great. With a ribbon can be nice, because then you can blend the two, get a little more body and a little more point.
I've always
Sheps are great,
loved
yeah.
those Sheps CM.
Yeah.
Great on the
Any particular preamp, pressure.
The one you got?
The flavor that you want. I mean, it just depends on what it's going on, what you're trying to blend it with.
Favorite board to mix if you're on an analog.
The last time you guys picked on an analog console.
Yeah, that's a better.
Long time.
It's not happening a lot, but when I go down to Bonnaroo for that, we took a number of analog consoles down there, SSL and my Soundcraft, Midas, and I enjoyed all of them. But surprisingly, the Soundcraft DC2000, which is mine and resides in my basement now, just waiting to be used for something. It sort of repeatedly was one of the best sounding boards. No, but he told me it would be good. He's talking about Richard Dodd. You guys should go find out more about Richard Dodd. Awesome. Actually, if you want to find out, you guys and some of the other guys here, I also have a podcast called Recording Studio Rock Stars, and it's on iTunes, and it's all interviews with producers and ask a lot of questions. You might want to ask.
So Massenburg.
Yeah, George Mass.
Well, go-to vocal.
Stylistic. I mean, depends on what
Depends
stylist.
on- and every vocal
you
is
know,
going to be different. Some mic.
SM7 is your.
Yeah.
Sure, SM7 is a great.
It kind of works about 90% of the time.
I think
For a lot of
SM7 is inspiring to sing into, and well, I don't know, it seems to be, I don't think. But I don't think it sounds, I've done a couple of A/B things where I was disappointed, it actually doesn't sound as good as you think
As
it
you
does.
told yourself.
Right,
Yeah.
as I've told myself it does. But people love to sing into it. It's
Yeah.
it's just the shape and the size and its maneuverability.
It's very directional. It's
Well,
all
I mean-
about right here. You have to speak up
In
there,
A/B
you know.
stuff, I'll go, well, this one sounds better than this one, better than this one. But does it sound better in the context of this? So I think a lot of people find an SM7 works well in a mix as opposed to by itself, right? If you're recording a vocal that's out there on its own, yeah, maybe an SM7 is not your choice. But
I've taken a vintage U67, and it sounds wonderful by itself, but then
Right.
when the track's going, I'm like, God, why can't I hear the vocal? I can't sit it in there.
yeah, it's definitely the way things fit. Like I have a hard time answering these questions because I feel like I try different stuff all the time. So I always have a hard time saying, well, this is the way I go, because it just depends on what I'm recording.
With that, trying different stuff, I always have an SM7 right next to
Yeah.
whatever I'm trying.
Yeah,
because
sure.
it tends to work. Like a 57 works in a lot
Great
of
in the control
situations.
room.
Yeah.
Cut it with it without picking up too much.
Yeah, I mean,
harmonic.
most things I will throw up multiple mic picks.
But sometimes
in
it's about
place.
enhancing the performance and get people headphones, sing better, because headphones really sometimes constrain or just tighten things up a little too much.
Let's
As far as
see if there are any
performance.
questions. Anybody in the audience?
Nothing? Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. like being in the industry for as long as you guys have, what is like your signal that the song is finished? Like it's done, like it's ready for the world
That's
to
not
hear?
fair. You can't ask that question.
I'm just
When the
asking.
song is finished.
Wow.
Well, I mean, for me, I'm not a producer, so I don't get to make that decision. I just press record and put up the microphones, and when they say, hey, that's good, I'm like, cool, all right. See ya, we'll send you an invoice. So, I mean, it's probably different for you guys. You know, being in a commercial facility, people come and book the time,
Right.
and they leave when they're done. So that's definitely a different question in my
It's more the role of the
Yeah, well,
To
it
make
could
that
be two
call.
roles. It could be, if you're producing, you got to make a bunch of musical decisions about whether the song is complete, whether you've completed the recording of it, and if you're mixing, if you're
Yeah.
a mixer, you may have to make a bunch of decisions about whether the mix is finished, but it may also be whether you've made the right decisions about editing, whether you've removed some things and featured other things to know if it's right. I find that sometimes it's helpful to add a little too much in the recording process because you can always take it away. Just remember to take it away.
But yeah, there's other problems because too many people, it's there, I paid for it, I want it in there.
Yeah, we all do it. You know, it's like, you know, I got
Well,
a
doesn't
basement
work.
that testifies to
Yeah,
that,
right.
full of stuff, you know.
When I mix, somebody hires me to mix a song, and I'm, I'm usually working by myself, and then I send it to them when I feel like I'm done, or feel like I'm ready for them to start giving some input or some tweaks or something. And a lot of times, I find that I could tweak a song forever. So sometimes I just have to say, even though I don't feel like I'm ready to hand it over, this is probably, and surprising, I mean, sometimes we've got a fair amount of tweaking, but a lot of times I hand it over, and they're like, man, that's great, we're done. Let's go to the next song or whatever. And it's, but I mean, I think I have a tendency to never be done with it, and I could easily tweak it way too long. But when you start making so many small adjustments that make you lose perspective of the song mix as a whole, then I think you can start digging yourself into a hole. That's one of the bad things about automation. Automation is fantastic, and the fact that I can automate frequency adjustments on a
DS.
plug-in is in as small of an increment as I would like, or I can make 10th of dB volume rides, or all these kind of things. It's great that I have the ability to do that, but it can make you lose perspective of the song as a whole. And instead of thinking big broad terms of the guitar solo needs to hit you in the face more, or the background vocals are too loud, you're writing up and down syllables, and you lose perspective of the overall song mix.
So there's a law called Parkinson's Law, which says that any task will expand to fit the time allotted for it. So perhaps a more important question is to ask yourself, how many songs can you produce and mix between now and the next time I see you? You know, like do you want to be stuck on that first song trying to get it just perfectly right? Or how about just doing 10 songs? You know, how far advanced will you be if you get a bunch
I think it's also healthy to take breaks because you lose perspective the longer you're in the middle of it, like Russ said. Take breaks, come back, fresh airs,
I think
and know where you are.
a lot of
point.
that comes to us, I think just the nature of wanting to be in this industry is that we're all kind of perfectionists, and we hear things, I think, differently than most people. And so
Different tastes.
we want to make it sound as best as possible, and so we will work on it until it'll never sound as best as possible to us, probably. So it is finding a stopping.
And it also won't sound the same necessarily to the artist or same important
Right.
points.
Yeah, no,
Say you work
exactly.
really hard on this effects on the vocals, these delays and stuff, and they don't even notice.
That's
That
right.
sounds great, huh?
I mean,
Whatever.
back to the mic, the
You know?
mic choice question. The mic that I like, typically not the same as the mic that Russ likes or Mark. So, you know,
Yeah.
it's like everyone's got different flavors that they all enjoy. And so our perfectionist levels will all be very different on where they're going to go.
Yeah.
There's also something that you guys are going to experience, which is the record that you're working on right now. You're going to finish it, and you won't know what you really think of it until 6 months goes by and you listen to it and you forgot about it.
Yeah.
Then you're going to go, oh, now I get it.
I mean, usually you're going to hate it. Because
You're gonna hate it
by the
for
time you
about
listen to it
6
again,
months.
you're like, oh man, why did I do that? I could have done this differently. I should have pushed that more.
Saying to listen
Any
to
other
this stuff I
questions?
work-
Yeah.
Panel,
What is y'all's favorite choice for making the drum kit?
Ooh, that's a
Again,
hard
it
one.
depends on,
Right now, I'm going to find out tomorrow when I go visit Fame and
Yeah,
Muscle
right.
Shoal Sound.
Yeah.
the style of the song, what it needs. It needs a lot of focus. I mean, it's going to be a multi-mic thing. I mean, if it just needs to be a feel in the thing in the room, probably do it with a couple mics. It really depends on, because go back in history, there's some great recordings of the one mic picking up everything, you know?
Yeah, you
So
can,
it
you can
really-
record with one mic drums too. You can take a mic and stick
Yeah.
it somewhere between the kick and the snare and
And
get,
get a
really
good image
cool
of
thing.
what's happening.
You know, I think I remember hearing, the DAP Kings?
Oh,
Heard
yeah.
the DAP Kings? I think that's how those guys were recording the drums on that stuff. And then, 2 mics and put one above and put one out front by that. The recorder man technique is just 2 mics where you've got one that's the same distance to the beater on the kick and the center of the snare, and you pan them out so it makes them centered and you get a real cool sound that way.
The more mics you add, the more potential problems you can create with relationships, face relationships. So it could either enhance or degrade by where you place them. So it's
Well,
keep
understanding
that in.
that too
That's part of the-
allows you to,
having the chops.
potentially fix that or, make adjustments for that. And then, I had a friend of mine that just recorded drums not too long ago, and he put 2 room mics behind baffles, back in the room. And it was I'd never seen anyone do that before, and it was a really cool, dark sound. So I'd say play with things until you find what you like. And school is a great time for that too, right? Because you're doing sessions for projects. And it's like, all right, they taught me how to do this. I'm not going to do that. Let me do something totally different, right? I mean, boundary mics in the corners of the room. I don't come up with anything. And we've got ceiling microphones in our place, and you can get some really cool sounds with that. Some people hate those. So it's like there's no right way to do this stuff, as long as you're not doing it wrong. If that makes sense, you know what I mean? Like when we're talking about phase relationships and stuff. I mean, there's definitely wrong ways to do this.
Should we
But-
break that down a little more? Should we break down the phase?
Well,
Checking
we've got
for
to wrap it
drums?
up. We've got another
All right.
panel. I really appreciate you all coming and taking the time out of your days to talk with us and give us all these tips and share your experience with us. If you would all, please give them a hand and welcome.
Get the snaps back there.
Hey, guys, we're going to do a quick change. We've got 4 more panelists that'll be up just in about 15 minutes and do talk about production. And if anyone needs to use the restroom, if you're not familiar with the facilities, they're to your left right here. So we'll be back at about 3:30.